We are now recording this session. Welcome to 7 Strategies for Success, Applying Best Practice in International Credential Review. For those participating right now live, we will be moving through a presentation in about 45 minutes with our fantastic panel that we'll introduce in just a few moments. We'll take some time to ask some questions of you folks, and then we'll certainly leave some time to take questions from you closer to the end of our time. So by all means, be sure to jot some notes down as we go. If anything comes to mind, we'll have some time to take questions a little bit further on. But we've got some smiling faces that you're seeing from us right now. It is, I should remind everyone, it is 8 a.m. in Shanghai, midnight in London, 3 a.m. in Moscow, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon here in Vancouver. And this is a fantastic webinar. So let's just get started and introduce you to your panel. And if you want to start us off, and we can go around the table here and introduce all of ourselves and our individual responsibilities.
Hi, my name's Ann Koenig, and I'm with the AACRAO International Office. The office is in Washington, D.C., and I work from my home office in Scottsdale, Arizona. So greetings to everybody from sunny Arizona.
Hi, my name is Leslie Clausen-Eicher, and I am also with the AACRAO International Office. And like Ann said, although our office is in Washington, D.C., I work from my home office in Tacoma, Washington. So greetings from rainy Tacoma.
Good afternoon, Colorado State University. This is Lois Frederick. I'm the Manager of International Credential Evaluation here in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Excellent. And my name is Aaron Anderson with the University of British Columbia. I'm also the VP for Communications with International ACAC, and I will simply be moving us along our slides today, making sure that we're staying on track and occasionally popping in to ask a poll question to learn a little more about the audience. So in great webinar Wednesday fashion, let's start us off with a poll question and just try to get a sense of where everyone is joining us from. So if you've been in a webinar before, you know what this question is all about. Here we are. Let's get a sense of where people are joining us from. So please take a moment to click on your screen and answer that. I'm looking here and looking to see where everyone is as the poll questions come in. Looks like some people are maybe checking their driver's license or their business cards to see what part of the world they're in. All right. Now we'll close the poll, share the results. And as one might expect with time zones in the world, and the topic today looks like far and wide the majority is here in North America. All right, and we have one more poll as we go right now, and let's get a sense of the different responsibilities of the audience and the participants. So what is your current role? What is your role? And this is where you may indeed need to check your business card. If you have an identity, then you need to check what side of the desk you're on. And certainly with this topic, we thought there'd be a good number of university representatives, but it looks like there's a bit of a mix too, which is really fantastic, both high schools and university side. All right, looks like most results are in, and fantastic to see. So it's a good range on both sides of the desk, as we see in this profession. So from wherever you're joining us from whatever role you are, welcome. Let's get started here and talk a little bit about what we're going to be discussing in this afternoon.
Warm greetings to you from all of your colleagues at AACRAO. AACRAO, the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers, is a nonprofit, voluntary professional association of more than 11,000 higher ed professionals who represent approximately 2,600 institutions in more than 40 countries. AACRAO International is committed to the professional development of your international admissions and credential evaluation staff. We are the premier provider of professional development, training, and current research on foreign educational systems, including AACRAO Edge. Thank you very much to International ACAC for inviting us to present the 7 strategies for success, applying best practice in international credential review. You may wonder how we arrived at 7 strategies rather than 8 or 17 or 4. The number isn't really as important as the strategies themselves. These are essentially the philosophical and procedural underpinnings of what we do in international credential evaluation and admissions. All the nuts and bolts work we do, reviewing transcripts, checking grading scales, reading application essays, or reviewing English test scores, all of it should be grounded in and driven by these basic principles of best practice in international admissions. This list is not comprehensive, but we believe these strategies are essential in doing your job well and serving your institution and your applicants and students. With that, let's get started.
Thanks, Leslie. Number 1, the foundation. Thoroughly understand your institution's mission and domestic admissions policies. This is the foundation. This is what you know best. Your school, your college, your university. This goes beyond the year you were founded, the number of students on your campus. This is who your institution is and who your institution tells the public it is. What is your institution's mission or vision? How is that mission communicated to potential students and their families? Do you have it tucked away in your catalog, or is it front and center on your webpage and all you do? While your mission may remain the same over the years, your role in fulfilling the mission should be an active part of your institution and your role in the institution. Vision and mission shape what the institution does and how you do it. So your work as an admissions professional is to know your institution's admissions policies to determine whether the applicants coming to you are a good fit for your institution, based on an interpretation of their portfolio, which most importantly includes their academics, grades, subjects completed, and other academic factors. You look at an applicant's academic profile to determine how does his or her profile compare to that of the student who is successful at your institution. And if you are in the role of advising and preparing students for admission to higher education in the U.S., helping them to find the right fit for university study, the message to share with your students is, you're not just looking for an institution where you can survive, you are looking for the place where you will thrive. That's why the foundation for your work in international admissions is the institutional mission. Your work in international admissions should bring that mission to life. And in these challenging times when international applicants might be somewhat apprehensive about applying to your institution, if you're located in the U.S., they may be apprehensive about coming to the U.S., be sure to emphasize the message, you are welcome here. If any questions or issues arise in the admissions process, go back to your domestic applications policy for guidance on how to approach them. Your policies for applicants from U.S. institutions are your foundation for making decisions that affect your international applicants. So, get good training, get to know your colleagues, share, and keep on learning. That's what we're doing today. Master the fundamentals of best practice. These are the principles that guide the work we do. Each time, every time. The fundamentals are the nuts and bolts of the institutional policy. You may have familiarity with the U.S. educational system now, and with good training and the help of good colleagues, you will learn to recognize the major educational system models around the world, along with their documentation and grading practices. You'll learn credential evaluation methodology. You'll develop the habit of keeping up to date on events that affect education around the world. If you master these principles of best practice, you'll create a structure, a framework for yourself that will actually simplify your job and all your processes. Advocate for continuing education resources and keep on learning. How do you master the principles of best practice? Get good training and keep on learning. This should be one of the fun parts of your job. Spend some time finding out what's available to help you become better at your work, and research what is accessible and worthwhile. There are lots of good resources and webinars out there that are free, but at the same time, you will need professional development that is not offered for free. So learn how to advocate for yourself and for the value that training adds to your institution and for your students when you have the resources to do the best job possible.
Good training will lead you to good colleagues. Ask questions, share the expertise, seek out a mentor, become a mentor. Once you start learning and seek out professional development and opportunities, you will meet good colleagues. The international credential profession is a small and dedicated group. International credential folks love to talk about their field and their work. We would love to encourage all of you to get involved with International ACAC or any other professional organization in the field of international education. The strength of international credential evaluation profession is like any other group. The health and future depend on bringing new professionals and providing them with the opportunity to grow. Mentors need mentees. Mentees need mentors. Think about your skills and consider stepping forward. Those of us presenting here have both been mentors and mentees, often simultaneously to one another.
That's true. Identify and rely on reliable resources, sources of accurate information and training. So now that we've mentioned what great colleagues, training, and mentoring exist in our field, we need to emphasize something connected and no less important. The reality is you need to be critical in choosing your training. We hope that you and your institution have a budget for training and professional development. We all realize that for most of us, the budget is limited. It is important that you use the budget you do have judiciously. It can be wonderful to travel to a conference in a glamorous location, but if that conference doesn't provide the kind of resources and networking opportunities you need the most, then it may not be the best place to spend your funds. Additionally, there may be a resource out there that is free and has loads of info, but if the content isn't, quote, official info, or it doesn't advocate our shared guidelines for best practice in our field, then it is not a useful resource for your work. When we say reliable sources of accurate information, what do we mean? To be sure you're using a source of accurate information, you'll need to know how to differentiate between primary source information and other sources of information. So what is a primary source? In credential evaluation, a primary source for a particular system of education would be the Ministry of Education or other government body that regulates education or a specific institution. A secondary source would be a review or report that draws from or uses information from the primary source. The point is to know the source of the information you are seeking and to know which sources are official sources of information. Again, the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Higher Education is often a good source, while somebody's blog on a study abroad experience in Austria may be entertaining and insightful, but not a primary source of information that you should rely on. Additionally, it's important to understand the perspective of the resource you're using. We at AACRAO love to use the fabulous and free international education guides published by Alberta, Canada. These guides were developed by the government of Alberta to evaluate the credentials of people applying for employment, immigration, and residency in Alberta. It's important to remember when using this resource that the information provided is from the perspective of the province of Alberta, Canada. The same is true of materials from the great organization EP-NUFIC in the Netherlands. EP-NUFIC publishes country profiles, including information about the educational system, credentials awarded, and sample documents. But the information they show about recognition of those credentials is given in the context of the Dutch educational system. And a reminder to users of our product, AACRAO's EDGE database of country educational systems, the placement recommendations that are shown in EDGE reflect the suggested comparability of non-US credentials in the context of the US educational system. And by the way, don't forget that we've included some handouts for you in our presentation. One is a list of ministries of education around the world with their URLs, and the other is a handout of online resources for international credential evaluation.
That's right. So we'll have all of those handouts available on our website, and same as this recording. And Anne, I should say, as a university in Canada, if it's good enough for Canada, then it probably should be good enough for a lot of institutions. But that's probably a biased opinion of mine. So good points to be mindful of where you're evaluating for.
Be prepared for change. Education is dynamic. Consider the factors that affect change in education. While we usually take the long view and look very broadly at a given educational system, there are also times when changes are sudden, dramatic, and sweeping. Take, for example, the earthquakes in Haiti. The entire infrastructure was impacted. Documentation, let alone verification, was difficult, if not impossible, to obtain. The fall of the Soviet Union resulted in varying paces of change, with the Baltic states moving quickly and deciding to a new system of education, while Russia moved at a very different pace with different outcomes. There are a number of reasons and ways education systems change. In Haiti, it was a natural disaster. In the Soviet Union, it was the breakup of a political system. In Syria, it's a civil war. In Europe, it was the European Union and the Bologna process. So stay flexible and stay in tune.
Avoid debates on educational systems being superior or inferior. Education systems are simply different, and they reflect a country's history, culture, politics, and economic needs, as well as its underlying philosophy of the role of education in its society. All of these factors are built into the system of education, and thus the education offered reflects all of these factors. As a counselor or admissions officer, you get this, but how often do we run into the beliefs or arguments about inferiority or superiority of education in another country? It seems that everyone has an opinion and everyone is eager to voice it. Your work is to focus on the student's A, eligibility for admission to higher education, and B, preparation for academic success in the program for which he or she has applied. For us as international education professionals, the most important point is to focus on finding and creating a good fit for a student who is coming from a school environment that is quote-unquote foreign, and aiming for academic success in a university environment that is equally foreign. That means high school and secondary counselors need to be vigilant in preparing their students well for the U.S. admissions application process, and U.S. admissions officers need to be well trained and prepared for their role in the admissions selection process.
So, strategy number 4. Learn the basic educational system models and master the ones you see most often. How many countries are there in the world right now? Well over 200. But as an admissions credential evaluator, you don't need to learn the details of over 200 educational systems. Looking around the globe, we can identify some basic patterns of educational systems. Think about it for a moment. How many countries in the world that are nowhere near England use English as a common language? Why is French spoken in so many countries that are so far flung from France? Why do some countries that were once a part of the Soviet Union still follow the structure of education from the Soviet time period? Think historically, and you'll find the answers. As we discussed earlier, educational systems are different and reflect a country's history, culture, and economic needs. Looking at a globe or a map in terms of world history, thinking of empires and colonial history and political powers, when it comes to looking at educational systems, start big. Learn the basic educational system models and the countries that follow each one. So when you look at an applicant's records, first identify the country they're from. Think about which of the major educational system patterns is used in that country. Apply your knowledge about that pattern to help you interpret the applicant's record. Then work on mastering the details of the systems or countries you see the most often. Do in-depth work to learn about the structure of the system. Does it match the original pattern? Look at things like how education is regulated in the country. What type of a system of, quote, recognition exists? What's the style of teaching and learning in the country? What kind of assessment or grading system is used? How are official documents issued? How do students get those official documents? Is there a system to have official documents sent to institutions directly? One of our starting points in looking at the basic educational system models is their structure. The number of years in the sequence from elementary through completion of academic secondary education, followed by the structure of higher education in terms of the levels of the credentials that are offered and the number of years or units required to complete each one and move to the next level. So let's look at the U.S. system, which I assume most of you are familiar with. Elementary and secondary education. So in the U.S., the sequence of elementary and secondary education encompasses grades 1 through 12. Early childhood education is available in daycare centers and preschools, and there is a pre-grade 1 level called kindergarten. But those preschool years do not count as elementary school. Elementary begins with grade 1, which children usually enter at age 6. The structure of the 12-year system can be configured differently from one school district to another. It can be 6 plus 3 plus 3, or 8 plus 4, or 5 plus 4 plus 3. But no matter what the sequence, in the U.S., grades 9 through 12 are considered high school. And those are the years that admissions staff look at when considering a high school student for admission to higher education. In the U.S., the undergraduate degree is the bachelor's degree. A bachelor's degree is generally thought of as a 4-year program. A bachelor's degree usually requires at least 120 semester hours of credit, which, done as a full-time student, taking 15 credit hours per semester, takes 8 semesters to complete, so 4 years. It's really more accurate to think of it, though, as being made up of credit hours, a total of 120 semester hours of credit, because it's common in the U.S. for students to attend part-time or to take a semester or a year off during their bachelor's studies. In the U.S., the semester system is most common, but there are also institutions that follow a quarter system, or some that offer 3 full semesters per calendar year with little break time between semesters. So given all these variations, again, the most accurate and common way to define the length of the U.S. bachelor's degree is in terms of credit requirements. Now we're going to talk about some of the other educational systems in the world, and then later we'll look at a slide that gives us more a depiction of some countries around the world that use the U.S. system. But first, let's look at some other major patterns.
The British system and its variations. First of all, we need to emphasize that the United Kingdom encompasses England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. Education in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland uses the same basic system and terminology. Scotland has its own educational system, and terms may have different meanings than in the other UK countries. The structure of education in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland begins with 11 years of elementary and secondary study. The final certificate awarded is the General Certificate of Secondary Education, commonly abbreviated as GCSE. For schools outside of the UK that offer the British curriculum, the certificate awarded is titled General Certificate of Education Ordinary Level, or colloquially GCE-O levels. Either of these is the first stepping out point. Students who leave school at this point with GCSEs or O levels may continue on to post-secondary vocational education but are not eligible for university admission. University-bound students study for another 1 or 2 years. After year 12, students can earn the GCE Advanced Subsidiary Level Certificate or the full GCE Advanced Level Certificate after 13 years. At the university level, students study for 3 years typically and earn the bachelor's degree, which can be 4 years more, which can be 4 years in some fields of study. Because a 3-year bachelor's degree after a 13-year elementary secondary sequence comes to 16 total years, most U.S. higher education institutions consider the British 3-year bachelor's degree to be comparable to the U.S. 4-year bachelor's degree. In other words, 12 plus 4 equals 16 for the U.S., and 13 plus 3 equals 16 for the UK. At both the secondary and post-secondary level, the UK approach to education is examinations-based. Examination syllabi are set by external examining bodies for secondary education or by the university for higher education. Teaching is done through affiliated institutions, and examinations are conducted by the external examining bodies or university. Official documentation is issued by the examination body or by the university. Commonwealth countries share the British educational heritage. Key concepts of British education apply, but have been adapted to the needs and goals of the Indigenous area since independence. Also, individuals in these countries may take examinations offered by British examining bodies and may hold British qualifications. Some of the countries that follow the British model or variations on it can be found on every continent. For example, India, South Africa, and Malaysia. Those are 3 of many. Let's take a look now at the French system. After 12 years of elementary and secondary education, French pupils can earn the baccalaureate, which leads to university admission. Currently, the system in France is 12 plus 3, or bac plus licence. 1 further year leads to the maîtrise. Many U.S. higher education institutions think of the maîtrise as the credential comparable to the U.S. bachelor's degree. The French approach to education is examinations-based. National examination syllabi are set by the Ministry of Education and are administered by an académie, which is an educational administrative district at the secondary level. The universities operate autonomously within a legislative framework set by the ministry, but the ministry awards the final university diploma. At all levels, promotion to the next year of study depends on passing year-end examinations. Quite a few countries in Africa follow the French model, as does Haiti, here in the Western Hemisphere.
So let's move on to the Soviet system, another one of the major educational systems. So the French system is highly centralized. And talk about highly centralized when you talk about the Soviet system. Imagine for a moment that during the USSR era, until the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991, every aspect of education was dictated and managed by an office in Moscow. From the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, to the Arctic Sea, to the Pacific, across the entire Soviet Union. No matter where you lived, in a big city like Moscow, or a small town in Central Asia, or on the tundra in Siberia, you studied the same thing at the same time as everyone else in your grade level or your university major across the entire USSR. The Russian Federation has retained that centralization. It also kept the same basic educational system structure, 11 years of elementary and secondary, followed by a 5-year first-level degree, degree program, which resulted in a diploma, and the diploma conferred what was called a qualification. It was both an academic degree and an employment credential. In the early 2000s, a new Western-style structure was introduced, a 4-year bachelor plus a 2-year master. But the 5-year diploma still exists. Today, most students in Russia still take the 5-year Soviet-style programs in order to get viable employment qualifications, rather than the 4-year bachelor-type program, which is a more general academic degree. Let's move on from gray and dreary Russia to sunny Spain. If we take another look at the map, it should be clear that one major educational system model reflects the influence of Spain. The structure of the educational system in Spain is a 12-year elementary and secondary system, followed by a 4-year first-level degree that is called a titulo, or title. Just like in the Russian system with its qualification, that's an employment credential, the titulo is simultaneously a higher education credential and an employment credential. While the Spanish language is a common denominator for Latin America, there are lots of variations on the original Spanish system, depending on each country's historical and cultural development. Some countries in Latin America have an 11-year elementary and secondary system, something to be mindful of when you're looking at documents from this region. Another thing to watch out for in the Latin American systems is the use of variations on the word that sounds like words in the US system or in English. For example, bachelor. You'll find bachillerato and bachiller and similar words that don't all mean the same thing. In the Latin American systems, it's important to review the English translations carefully and do your own research to confirm what this bachelor-like word really means. In some countries, it represents graduation from secondary school, high school. In others, it can mean a higher education degree. So those are just a few tips to keep in mind when you're reviewing records from Spanish-speaking countries.
Finally, we get to Bologna. The Bologna system is the newest educational system of all the models that we're studying. Its name refers to a process of accords agreed upon by 29 countries that signed a declaration at the University of Bologna in Italy in 1999. The declaration was a commitment to increasing mobility throughout the European Union by, for one, creating a three-cycle education system with terminology generally called bachelor, master, doctorate, but that not in every case. It also created a system of credits and grades that make exchange among countries easier. It introduced a quality assurance system, and it eased recognition of qualifications among countries, thereby increasing mobility. The Bologna system did not make any changes to the elementary and secondary structures. So with Bologna, what we have is a uniform post-secondary structure layered over differing secondary systems. There are currently 48 countries that have signed on to Bologna. You can see them at the European Higher Education's area's website, which is included in your handout. Now moving to countries that have US-based 12+4 structure. The next slide shows you a sampling of countries whose educational structure is based on that of the US. A total of 12 years of elementary and secondary education and a 4-year bachelor's degree. Look at these countries. Many of them are among the top 15 countries of origin of international students in the United States, so you may well have seen documents from these countries.
And now we're on to strategy number 5. Practice due diligence. Do you have official transcripts with appropriate signatures and official seals? Transcripts from the academic records office, not the math department or the instructor? Do you receive literal English translation when original documents aren't issued in English? It's always best to work from the original language document. Having both original language and English allows you to compare characters between two given students where there might be a translation issue. As an example, I had one situation where calculus, advanced math C, and college math were translation issue, pure and simply because the way the translation was put together by the students, they had all sat in the same course at the same time frame at the same institution, but they didn't, the translation was poor. So I was able to go back to the original document and assure that by checking those characters. So also check that the institution and program is recognized by the Ministry of Education in the country. If the admission decision is made without using the research on the institution, you might have to rescind the admission decision once the credential evaluator has had the opportunity to review the documents. Developing and reviewing a step-by-step procedure for reviewing application files is essential for best practice in admission, both domestic and international. If you don't have one, work with your colleagues to create one. You might already have it, but that's by force of habit. So it's important that the procedure be written down, shared with everyone involved in the admissions review process, and followed in every case. This will ensure that you are following the same process, thereby ensuring consistency. The map you are seeing here is an illustration of the Perceived Corruption Index from the organization Transparency International. It is a reminder about parts of the world where corruption is a big problem, and may make it difficult not only for us to be sure what documentation is official and authentic, but for the student to get authentic documentation in the first place. In areas of the world where there is disruption of the educational system or rampant corruption, fraud is very common. Extra care and due diligence is required. I did have a situation where we don't do admission and credential evaluation in the same office at our institution. So some of the items that evaluation team needs to be kept in mind no matter what happens and where it happens in the process. A recent example for me here at Colorado State, we had 4 students from 3 different countries off the continent of Africa. All of them had transcripts from the same institution, which would make sense. The transcripts were all from the same time frame, at least when we looked at what was presented to us. After a little more research, we realized that working with Education USA in country, as well as eventually the institution, we discovered that all of them were fake transcripts. We had to rescind the admissions decision and stop the I-20 process for all 4 students.
So let's go on to the next slide, best practice guides from ACACRAO. For over 100 years, ACACRAO has been providing guidance in developing and promoting best practice. Several ACACRAO colleagues, including me, have written guidance materials to provide guidance for best practice in the credential evaluation review process, including step-by-step procedures and questions to consider in customizing the process in your office. The first 2 resources that are listed here are free online, and both are long articles that give you step-by-step procedures and advice for developing your own procedures in your office. The third resource shown at the bottom of the slide is ACACRAO's International Guide. This is a comprehensive resource book for all aspects of international education. Leslie and I both have contributed material to this book. It's huge. You can look at the table of contents and the author's bios on the ACACRAO Publications website if you want to take a look at that. The book is updated every few years, and the 2016 edition, the latest one, is really expansive. This book is for sale through the ACACRAO Publications office, and if your institution is an ACACRAO member, there's a big discount. And ACACRAO publishes this type of material as well as country guides, country studies, and other guides to best practice. This 2016 edition of the International Guide is the first one that's available on Kindle. ACACRAO also provides many types of training opportunities for admissions and credential evaluation staff at our conferences and as standalone programs. At the end of our presentation, we have a slide that lists our upcoming training opportunities, and you're welcome to contact any of us who are here on the webinar today for information about our programs, or look at our website and contact our office in Washington.
Okay, we'll move on to strategy number 6, which is evaluate for comparability and not quote-unquote equivalency. In international admissions, how often do we hear the word equivalent used in talking about admission requirements to U.S. institutions? The international applicant must have the, quote, equivalent of a certain diploma or degree, or the equivalent of a certain grade average, or the equivalent of a certain subject or group of subjects for admission or to meet subject requirements. But equivalency is a myth. No 2 credentials are equivalent within the U.S., within the same institution, within the same program of study, even between 2 students sitting in the same courses at a school or university in the United States. It's more productive to think of the work we do in terms of comparability. As international credential evaluators, our role is to compare the applicant's academic background in the context of his or her education system and apply that comparison to our U.S. institutions' admissions standards. This will help us determine an international applicant's eligibility or suitability in terms of being comparable to what we expect from a domestic applicant. We use our knowledge and reliable resources to analyze an academic record from another country in terms of the level of education it represents. For instance, for level, where does it fit into the structure of the educational system? what comes before it, what comes after it. Okay? The scope of education includes the content of the curriculum, its breadth and depth, whether it's general education or specialized in some way, or what is emphasized in that study. And finally, the purpose of the education in that country could prepare for university admission. It might prepare for post-secondary technical or vocational training, or simply for general employment. Our role is to compare the level, scope, and purpose of the education completed by the international applicant in their own country to the profile that you typically see from your domestic applicants. At that point, you can make your decision. This is where your institution's admission policies come into play. You start with the profile of your successful U.S. applicant pool as the basis for comparison, then analyze your international applicant's profile to determine how it compares. Does it meet the standard of the purpose for which you are evaluating? For instance, admissions, scholarships, athletic eligibility, fulfillment of certain academic requirements, or others.
The myth of high school equivalency. So here's an illustration of on this table showing the number of years of elementary and secondary education that leads to higher education admission in various countries. The number of years of complete secondary education varies from 10 years in some countries all the way through 14 years in Iceland. So how can we talk about equivalency? Keep in mind that this table only shows number of years, but sometimes that can be a stumbling block in the international admissions process. We might say, well, we don't accept that country's secondary credential because they don't have 4 years of high school in that country. But by applying the concept of comparability rather than equivalency, you place less emphasis on the number of years. You might open the door to applicants from countries whose upper secondary university prep education does not match the number of years of U.S. education exactly, even though in their own country the student would be eligible for university admission. And by opening that door, you might find students who will be a perfect fit for your institution.
For freshman admission, as an example, from the United Kingdom, is the General Certificate of Secondary Education, the GCSE, acceptable for freshman admission to your institution? Does it meet the criteria outlined in your admissions policy, or do you require the United Kingdom A-levels? If you take GCSE, is that considered an exceptional admission? Or possibly the Philippines? Do you accept the high school diploma from the Philippines, even if it only represents 10 years? Or do you only accept it from schools that offer 12 years? Are you consistent? What are the recommendations from ACACRAO? What is your institutional policy? Again, consistency. Even within the same country, credentials are not equivalent. How much less likely would that be to happen even between countries? So as a wrap, pretty much, strategy for success and a summary. It's been a quick presentation of 7 principles of best practice that lead to success in international admissions review. We could go into depth on any one of these concepts, and there are more to add. Our webinar today is meant to give you a taste of what best practice entails. Ultimately, it is all about what is helping to work more knowledgeably and effectively, and so we can be there to serve our students and our institutions better. So to review, the foundation for all of our work is our institution's mission and domestic policy, creating a good fit between student and institution. Successful international credentials evaluators create and maintain our knowledge base through professional training and development, along with the use of reliable resources, constant awareness of developments around us that affect education, and communication with colleagues. We focus on preparing students for success and reviewing their admissions applications without judgment about superiority or inferiority of educational systems. We learn the big picture of educational system models and apply that knowledge to focus on the differences in detail that exist country by country. We take care to outline and follow procedures consistently, examine documents carefully, Act appropriately if we find inconsistencies, and remain vigilant to protect the integrity of our institution and students. We analyze and compare to determine the student's applicant's fit for our institution. So what is strategy 7? Be confident. You know more than you ever did when this presentation started. Keep up the good work.
And I'd just like to add that the next slide is our list of training opportunities that's available through AACRAO International. And as I mentioned, you're more than welcome to contact any of us or through our website, our AACRAO International office in Washington, D.C., to get more information or to ask us any additional questions you might have.
We'd like to thank each of you who joined us and hope you found the information useful. In addition to the webinar, we're including resources which will be available to you on the International ACAC page where this recording will be found. So those resources are a list of ministries of education around the world and their URLs, and a list of online resources for international credential evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Leslie and Anne and Lois, thank you for your foundation here of supporting us in our credential evaluation. And we've got a good 5 or 10 minutes here before the top of the hour, wherever you may be in the world. And so I do want to open it up to the participants and take some questions here. And so it is me, Aaron Anderson. Yes, for those that came in, it may say Teresa that's talking under my photo, but it is Aaron Anderson with the University of British Columbia. Happy to have been a part of this session and learn a little bit myself here. And I do want to put it to you now, folks. Feel free to, in the control box, we'll take a couple minutes here just to see if there's any questions coming in. And you just can type in the questions. I have one myself for you folks, and so we talked about some really good background in terms of ensuring the authenticity of some of the documents. We talked about fraud. One question, I don't know if this would be your realm of responsibility or not, but something we struggle a little bit sometimes with is accreditation. So if you're looking at another country and the school, perhaps it's an international school, is following a U.S. style curriculum, we do want to ensure that the quality of education, just because they say they're following a U.S. curriculum, they're ensured that they're accredited. So is accreditation something that ACACRAO helps with? I know often we'll look to some of the 5 or 6 U.S. accrediting bodies, such as the Western Association or the Southern Association. Do you have any comments on in terms of accreditation, what institutions should be considering when they're thinking about accrediting bodies?
Well, I'll jump in on this one, and then my colleagues can add anything if they have any other ideas. The concept of accreditation or recognition or quality assurance or legal permission to operate as an educational institution differs from country to country. And then some countries have a federal system where it differs from state to state or province to province or Switzerland, canton to canton. It can be different in each jurisdiction. But with regard to international schools, and we get this question a lot, where do the international schools fall? If they're offering a U.S. type curriculum, for example, or a North American curriculum. I think in general it depends on the country and its legal framework for education and how institutions get recognized in that country. But I think in general, international schools are considered private entities. And so I would assume that first of all, again, this is just general, but depends on the country. First of all, it would have to have permission to operate as a private, let's call it a private business, in the sense of it's not covered under the laws regarding public education in the country. So that would be the first stage. It's operating with permission, but in a private sense, not regulated by the laws that regulate public education. Then as far as accreditation goes, some of the 6 U.S. accrediting agencies do accredit schools, what they call overseas. So, and in those 6 accrediting bodies do accredit schools from grade 1 through grade 12. Not all schools not all elementary and secondary or high schools in the U.S. are accredited by those associations, but those associations do that type of accreditation for that level of school. So one indicator of quality assurance would be if an international school is offering a U.S. curriculum that it is accredited by one of the 6 accrediting bodies, regional accrediting bodies. That's the first stage, the sort of foundational stage of trying to figure out the recognition of a school. The basic basis of it, though, is the school operating legally? Does it have permission by education authorities in the country to operate legally as a school and offer educational programs? And then secondarily, what type of quality assurance does it have? And the U.S. accrediting agencies, the regional accreditors, do accredit that level of school, elementary through secondary.
Right. And
I hope that's helpful.
Liana here, thank you. Liana just had a follow-up question, and she says, so if the school is accredited through, say, Advanced Ed, which would be sort of an offshoot of Southern Association Colleges and Schools, she's asking, is it necessary to get evaluation? So I'm guessing she's referring to ACACRAO evaluation of, say, a transcript or the school itself.
That's up to the college or university that's receiving the high school transcript. That's up to them. That's an institutional policy decision and not a fundamental best practice issue.
And it's up to the admissions offices to determine their confidence in the level of accreditation of the various institutions, and their alignment with the offshoots such as Advanced Ed. So we have another question here from Anthony, and Anthony's asking, perhaps I'll take this into general terms in terms of grading systems. So he was mentioning that looks like the grading system in Sweden, he understands, changed in 2014. So is there a resource where folks can go to find out the grading systems of various national curriculums?
Leslie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, there are lots and lots of resources on the web to find out detailed information about national systems. And Sweden is probably one of the countries that does the most detailed job. So yes, there is information out there about any changes or updates to grading scales. I would advocate the web for one, with the qualifier that you need to be careful and make sure that the sources that you're accessing on the web are primary sources. Remember, Anne talked about that, making sure that the source that you are using in your evaluations is primary. In other words, a Ministry of Education or higher education or institutional website. That is primary information. Another thing that I can advocate for is going to conferences and webinars and training sessions like this one, because colleagues in our field are doing primary research and sharing their findings. So we always like to put in a plug for attending conferences, attending webinars and training sessions, because you're going to have first-line new information presented to you there. So look at your budget and see if you can attend other sessions like this one.
That's great. Thanks, Leslie. And certainly earlier there was a comment, don't recall which one of you said, about going to a glamorous location for a professional development conference and not doing it just for the glamour of the location. Well, you know what? With International ACAC, we're very pleased to be able to say you can go to a glamorous location for this year's International ACAC conference and also go for a top-notch, high-quality conference. And that's, of course, because we are hosting our university with Case Western in Cleveland, Ohio. The dates is July 11th to the 14th. And you will be able to participate in sessions similar to this and many other sessions that will cover a variety of enrollment and admissions and recruitment strategies from the university side, and, of course, supporting the counselors. We're coming up to the top of the hour here, and looks like maybe we'll take, let's see if we have time for one more question. Is there a question? Doreen has a question about finding information. Follow-up question in terms of the 6 accrediting associations in the United States. She's asking about how we go about finding information. How do we go about finding out if a school is accredited by one of the accrediting associations in the United States? And I appreciate this may be going beyond your knowledge on this panel, but does anyone have any experience with the associations and whether or not their websites? I know myself. I've checked and have had sometimes some troubles checking on their websites to actually see if a school is actually accredited. Of course, it's one thing for a school on their own website to say, "Hey, look at us, we're accredited
Right.
by
Mhm.
Western Association," but often it's very difficult to. That's not necessarily authentic. You've got to then see if they're actually on a list somewhere else on that association. Any comments on that? Any experience? Is there any trick to doing that?
Well, I'll lead you to the easiest place to start as a first step. The website of the Council for Higher Education Accreditation. And the URL is very easy. The acronym is CHEA. So it's www.chea.org, Council for Higher Education Accreditation. That's an umbrella organization that approves accrediting agencies. There it is. Great. Thanks, Erin. And there you can link to the accrediting associations. And yes, it might be a little tricky to find the list of accredited associations on their websites, but they do exist. Every one of the accrediting associations has a list, and they refer to it as member institutions. They consider the institutions that are accredited by them to be members. So look for a directory of members or list of member institutions, and remember that there is each one has a separate compartment or a separate area of their accrediting agency for elementary and secondary. So it might be called schools as opposed to higher education, or schools and colleges, or different terminology, but they do have lists. And good luck, and be confident and keep on looking if you don't see it right away, because they are there.
That's great. Chia. There's association for everything, isn't there? Which is really
Right.
great. Thanks, Anne. I think that's going to wrap up our time today. This session has been recorded and it will be saved along with the slides and those fantastic handouts that AACRAO has provided for this session. So please continue to participate in future webinar Wednesdays. Let us know if this one was helpful. Let us know what other ones you might be thinking about by sending us an email. By all means, let us know on the International ACAC Facebook group. But my name is Aaron Anderson once again. Thanks to Anne, Leslie, and Lois. It's been a great time today, and I look forward to talking with all of you soon or seeing you soon. And have a great afternoon, morning, or day, and good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.